at the start of Biblia Hebraica, which is an introduction what the Hebrew Bible is. At page 1 they say this: all the writings which come to us from antiquity, including the writings of Old and the New Testament, have suffered from misadventures. The interpreter of this material cannot proceed from assumptions. The text to be interpreted must first be established. It is not already defined. The available witnesses to the text must first be examined in order to reconstruct a single form of the text, which we can assert with confidence to be as close to the form of the autographs. We should know what the text is. This is very important. The textual witnesses are not all equally reliable. Each has its own character and its own individual history. We must be familiar with these if we hope to avoid inadequate or false solutions. You see that? So you have to know the history of the text before you go to interpret it, because otherwise, as this guy says, you will get false solutions. All these evidences, which all of these judgments is based on, fall in two big categories. One of them is called vulgar text. Excuse my language, but it is the category of biblical text, vulgar text. This is to be found, by the way, in the second edition of Emmanuel's Tov from page 193 and 194. He says vulgar text. These texts are known from various places in Palestine. Their copyists allow themselves the freedom of inserting many changes and corrections in the text, and even of introducing an idiosyncratic, orthographic, and morphological practice. So these people allow themselves the freedom to alter the text. And he says examples of this are found in many Qumran texts. Wait a minute. Every day they be telling us that C scrolls conforms the Torah, that C scrolls proves the preservation. Yet many of texts of the Dead Sea Scrolls fall in the category what they call the vulgar text. But I'll get to this Masoretic text, by the way. This is the third part of it, inshallah. These texts, which are vulgar, are sometimes written with a great degree of carelessness and contain many erasures and corrections. It appears that severe scrolls and even Rabbi Meir's Torah, you see, them people who have done some study, they know this Rabbi Meir's Achi is about 2nd century. This Jewish tradition has about 120, if I'm not mistaken. Sami, you can correct me, inshallah. About 120 whom they call teachers of Tanayim, teachers. You know, we have the forefathers, we have the Salah, for example. This is their understanding of the Tanayim. Fourth, 120, I told you. The fourth one is this guy. So already early at this chain, he is the guy who Mishnah named him the most of everybody. Even his wife is quoted in the Mishnah amongst a few women who are quoted. This is a big guy. Yet the Torah of this predecessor to this all these teachers, this Torah of this guy who they say wrote the Mishnah, falls amongst the vulgar text. Imagine that. So this also contains many secondary readings of this type, in particular phonetics and other changes. The harmonizing additions, the linguistics, corrections, and textual changes in this text are very clearly non-original. See, when we talk about a original text and a polluted text, they look at us as if we are talking Chinese. Yet this guy says all of these texts which we have clearly non-original. And the secondary nature is also characteristic of this vulgar text. Even the Nash papyri falls among this group. You see that? All them jewels which they are talking about falls among the vulgar text. But we also have the non-vulgar text. Let's see what these are. Alongside the vulgar text, another relatively large number of texts lacking signs of the secondary nature, which we saw already in vulgar text. So this text does not have those secondary signs. These are described here as non-vulgar text and are usually conservative in nature. This is, they disallowed changes more than the other texts. You see that? So these people, they disallowed changes. Among the non-vulgar texts, those best known to us are the from which was created the Masoretic text in the Middle Ages. See that? So they say from Middle Ages until now, the text has been preserved. Despite the scrupulous care taken in the transmission of these texts, changes, corrections, such as correction of the scribes, which inshallah Akhi Sami will talk about it, and other corrections were inserted into them, and they also were corrupted. You see that? Also belonging to these groups are some of the non-aligned Qumran texts. Non-aligned? I thought this Qumran community is proving the Bible, is proving the preservation, yet these are texts which are non-aligned with those Masoretic texts. And yet they fall in the same category as the Masoretic text. So think about this text which is non-aligned to the Masoretic text is also non-vulgar in the same category. Okay? Now we get to the Masoretic text. This is the Hebrew which they use today. We don't know what the script of it was. They say Ezra gave it in Hebrew. Okay? But let's see what the Masoretic text is. The Masoretic text, sometimes called the received text or Textus Receptus, is strictly speaking a medieval representation of a group of ancient texts of the Bible. Ahmed, you here?
I'm here, bro.
Did Moses live in medieval times?
I was trying to make a joke, but I won't say it. No, he obviously didn't.
Thank you. Yet this text, which they use and they say goes back, is a representation of a medieval text. As a rule, the term Masoretic text is limited to a mere segment of the representative of the textual tradition of this Masoret, namely that textual tradition which has given its final form by by Aaron ben Asher of the Tiberian group of Masorets. Akhi, remember that Tiberian group of Masoret. It will become relevant later on. The term Masoretic text is imprecise for another reason. For the Masoretic text is not attested in any one single source. Do you hear that? There is not one single source which they can give us to say this is the Masoretic text. They say rather the Masoretic text is an abstract unit reflected in various sources which differ from each other in many details. You see that? So they have many sources. Out of that pool of sources comes this Masoretic text. And these sources, all of them, differ amongst each other. Variance within the group of the Masoretic text has been preserved in the notes of the Masorets of the East, which is called the Medina, and the Masoret of the West, which is called the Ma'arba. Akhi, let me repeat it again. They say Muslims are going at it with them Dawa script. Let's see where all these variants are mentioned in which Dawa script. Erst Wurtwein on page 12 and 13 says, Akhi, variance within the group of the Masoretic text has been preserved in the notes of the Masorets of the East and the Masoret of the West, the Medina and the Ma'arba, nothing about the JavaScript in here. He says the Soferim, they wrote the consonantal text proper. The Nakdanim, these are the people who are putting the vowels in it. So the Soferim are writing, the Nakdanims are vowing this text, and the Masorets are adding the marginal and final notes about the text. 3 different groups are going at it. You have this picture, Akhi, of it. So the Soferim are writing.
It's accurate.
Now, the earliest text which they have is Codex Aleppo. Codex Aleppo was written by Shlomo ben Boya. So he wrote it. Aaron ben Asher, he was responsible for his pointing and his Masoretic text. So, Akhi, there were 3 groups, writing, vowing, the notes. Aleppo has 2. Shlomo ben Boya wrote it, and Aaron ben Asher. You see, this guy is very important, Akhi. Inshallah, I will get to that in another live, which we go to some other paratextual elements which are not mentioned today, and this guy will come up. So this guy put the Masoretic notes and the vowing in Aleppo Codex. So we know who wrote Aleppo Codex, who vowed it of the 10th century. The same Shlomo ben Boya wrote a Torah manuscript in the year 930, to which Ephraim, his son, added the points of the Masorah. You see, Akhi, these people who are sons and fathers, they are writing and adding. I'll get to that. Why is that important? According to its colophon, the Leningrad Codex was the work of one man. One man. Samuel ben Jacob. He not only wrote it, but pointed it and added the Masorah as well. This is on page 13 of Introduction to Biblia Hebraica. And he goes on to say, in fact, we do not have any Hebrew manuscript of the entire Old Testament written earlier than 10th century. The oldest dated codex contains only the prophets and is dated from the year 895, which is Codex Crenses.
Sorry, repeat
So,
that.
Akhi,
Repeat that.
in fact, we do not have any Hebrew manuscript of the entire Old Testament written earlier than the 10th century. The oldest dated codex contains only the prophets and dates from the year 895, which is Codex Crenses. King James is using this Masoretic text of the Leningrad Codex. One man has written it, and one man has vowed it, and the same man has put all these Masorets. So they talk about, oh, we have so many writers, we have so many people, they be checking each other, they will controlling each other, they know what they are writing. Oh, your prophet came only one man, they say. Hey, we have the text of one man. The text of that man which you have is not Moses, it's Samuel ben Jacob. But sure, let me get to that. How do we know this stuff? And why is it important? Why am I mentioning this Tiberian school? Why am I mentioning that only one man is vowing this? Why is that relevant? I'll get to that. The oral tradition, let's see. You see, this evidence which we're talking about, many of them were discovered in Geniza. Geniza was a kind of a storage room where worn or faulty manuscripts were kept hidden until they could be disposed of formally. To avoid misusing or profaning a manuscript containing the holy name of God, in periods the contents of the Geniza would be buried in ground with due ceremony. Akhi, these people have a place to put the manuscripts in to be destroyed. And I'm not attacking and nothing, and I agree with them. If they think that these manuscripts contain the words of the name of God, surely they don't want it to be profaned, right? So they want to destroy it. I have no issue with that. Yet the same people are going around, Osman radiallahu anhu be burning manuscripts and whatnot, which is not even true, by the way, but we get to that. But think about this on page 11 of Introduction to Biblia Hebraica. It is also true that manuscripts were often destroyed during this medieval persecution of the Jews, sometimes by their adversaries, but sometimes also by the Jews themselves to prevent their secret books from falling into the wrong hands. So wait a minute. The adversaries are coming and they are destroying your text. For what? To destroy your lineage, to destroy your religion, to destroy your history. Yet, not one adversary of Islam ever destroyed the text of the Quran. Not one. Yet, until this medieval tide, all of them texts were destroyed. We talked about the script. We talked about the Masoretic text. Who wrote it? Which date do they come from? But what do they contain? Let's see. Before the text of the Old Testament was officially established, it was not regarded as unalterable. Accordingly, we should expect to find that those who were concerned with the transmission of the text would occasionally make deliberate, fully intentional alternation in the text. Biblia Hebraica. You see, these people are telling, before the text of Old Testament was established, it was not regarded as unalterable. And these people who are transmitting it, they occasionally make deliberate, fully intentional alternation in the text. Huh? They be telling us, no, only Muslims be claiming that. But let's see. In contradistinction to mistakes, which are not controllable, the insertion of corrections and changes derives from a consensuous effort to change the text in minor and major details. Such tampering with the text is evidenced in all textual witnesses. Tampering with the text is evidenced in all textual witnesses. Page 9 of second edition, Textual Criticism of the Hebrew Bible. On the same page, he says, corruptions as well as various forms of scribal interventions, changes, corrections are thus evidenced, again, he says, in all textual witnesses of the Hebrew Bible. In all of them, man, they be telling us it has been preserved. Let's see. Including the group text, now called the Masoretic text, and its predecessor, the Proto-Masoretic text. So already these corrections as well as scribal interventions has found their ways in the Masoretic text. Those who are unaware of the details of textual criticism may think that one should not expect any corruption in the Masoretic text. Yet, in spite of their precision, even the manuscripts which were written and vocalized by the Masoretes contain corruptions, changes, and errations. More importantly, the Masoretes, and before them the Sopherim, they acted in a relatively late stage of the development of the biblical text, and before they had put their meticulous principles into practice. The text already contained corruptions and had been tampered with during that earlier period when the scribes did not as yet treat this text with such a reverence. So paradoxically, the Sopharims and the Masoretes, they carefully preserved a text that was already corrupted. And inshallah, I will expand on this corruption, which is this paratextual elements, which is the third part of this. And inshallah, I will end with this. And thank you for bearing with me. It has become clear what is commonly called the Masoretic text does not reflect the original text of the biblical books in many details. Page 28, second edition. You see that? So this Masoretic text which they have, this guy is saying it has become clear of what is commonly called the Masoretic text does not reflect the original text of the biblical books in many details. You see that? So nothing about the JavaScript and nothing. It's just looking at the evidence. Differences between the Masoretic text and the earlier or different stages of biblical text will continue to be recognized. You see, the scholars are recognizing all of this. Only these fundamental evangelicals are the one who attacking nothing else. Moreover, even if we were to surmise that the Masoretic text reflects the original form of the Bible, think about this. It says, even if we accept it represents the original form of the Bible, we would still have to decide which Masoretic text reflects this original text, since the Masoretic text is not a uniform textual unit, but is itself represented in many witnesses. Similar problem arise when one compares the Masoretic text to the other textual witnesses. There never existed any one single text that could be named the Masoretic text. Do you hear that? There never existed any one single text that could be named the Masoretic text. They've been telling us you should believe in the Hebrew text. There never existed one text. In fact, at a certain stage, there was a group of Masoretic texts, and naturally, this situation requires a more precise formulation, since the texts of the Masoretic groups themselves already differed one from the other.